Transformers more than meets the... Oh, God. Oh, God. Transformers The Last Night is the 5th installment in the Transformers franchise. It is once again directed by Michael Bang Bang Bay. But the real question is it any good? Is it finally going to get better than the rest of the Transformers franchise? Let's get into it. So for those not in the know of what Transformers is, here's a quick rundown of what you need to know. So Transformers basically started as a toy line created by Hasbro in the 80s, and it was really popular. I loved Transformers. I thought they were great. The idea of it was that they were robots that could transform into cars or planes or other vehicles. They were robots in disguise. There were the Autobots, the good guys, and the Decepticons, the bad guys. The Decepticons were led by Megatron, and the Autobots were led by Optimus Prime. So after the toy range and after the animated series and the animated film, Michael Bay comes along and decides to reinvent the Transformers franchise, make a reboot of it for a new generation as a live-action film. And the first film is pretty cool. It's got live-action Transformers in it that look visually quite impressive. It's not the best film in the world, but you can see how it's the groundwork for something that could get progressively better. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is a whole can of worms that no one really wants to revisit because it's just ugly to look at, resorts to less than funny dick jokes at inappropriate times, and doesn't really do much for the Transformers franchise, other than establishing that there were Transformers on Earth earlier in the Earth's history at some point. Transformers Dark of the Moon is a marginally more watchable film than the last one. It involves Transformers essentially crash landing on the moon, and they've been there for a while. They need to go up there to get them and start a whole series of things happening on Earth, which means a city is in jeopardy. Transformers Age of Extinction involves the idea that Transformers have been on this planet, in fact, since dinosaur times. And it involves the Dinobots, which is a great concept that got introduced in the Transformers franchise, except they're only in it for 20 minutes at the end, and it's an incredibly disappointing film because it doesn't actually focus on anything in particular other than the fact that a country is in jeopardy this time. Which brings us up to speed for Transformers The Last Night, number 5 in the franchise. And is it any better than the ones we've had before? No. No, it's really not. See, my issue with the franchise is this. I want to like Transformers. I really want to like the franchise, but it is not really giving me anything to go on. So the plot of Transformers The Last Night basically revolves around the idea that Transformers, as has already been established, have been on the Earth for quite some time now. This particularly centers around the time that Transformers got involved with King Arthur and Merlin. A lot of the problems with this film focus on how cluttered the film is. It's just all over the place. It doesn't really know what it wants to focus on. It's got a plot line that you can kind of see going somewhere at the start, but then kind of tapers off into insignificance a little. There are a lot of characters in there that you question why they're in there. There are scenes in this film where there are kids that just don't need to be in there. There's the little girl at the start and at the end of the film who, for all intents and purposes, brings nothing to the actual plot line. There's a lot of convoluted plot points that just kind of don't really add up. You're watching the film and you're thinking, okay, this is setting out that Transformers are decimating the planet, and that is why the government have set up a military division to hunt and eradicate Transformers on Earth, because there is an all-out war and they are all seen as enemies, even though some of them have been saving our asses since the first film, which doesn't make sense because those are the ones that people will be going, oh, they're alright, because I remember seeing them fight against that thing that was going to kill us a while ago. What? But the more annoying thing is that some points on Earth are seen as completely decimated by Transformers, Autobots and Decepticon wars. But in other points, it's just like life goes on as per usual, and there are people in countries just playing it off like nothing's actually happened and life just goes on. And like a question that I kept going over in my mind throughout the start of the film was that if indeed Transformers have been interacting with humans for as long as they say they have, how has that not affected our technological state now? How is it that they have been so well kept through history that no one knows about them, and when they actually turned up and revealed themselves in the first film, it was a surprise even to most of our government? And that's briefly touched on with Anthony Hopkins. I found it hard to dislike Anthony Hopkins' character in this film, even though he came across as being slightly screwball in a way. I kind of liked him as a character. I kind of got into it, so it's like Anthony Hopkins kind of got a pass on this one. Like, yeah, the rest of the film is falling to dog shit around him, but he's kind of okay. So, kudos, Anthony Hopkins. You stayed the course. And the whole plot involving Optimus Prime turning against the Autobots and turning against all Transformers in order to recreate Cybertron only really happens about 45 minutes from the end. It's the same disappointment that I felt with the previous film, Age of Extinction, because I believed the film was going to be centering around the Dinobots, and the Dinobots only really entered into it at the end of that film. It was like that was the climax, was seeing them. And even then, now that that's been established, in this film, we actually see less of that. There's a battle sequence at the end that feels like a payoff because it is, in essence, putting the entire world in jeopardy, rather than just a city or some buildings or some people. It's a bigger high-stakes game, and that draws you into it to make you feel like there's a payoff when actually nothing really gets resolution. And one thing that really annoyed me personally, and I feel like I might be the only one that really got annoyed by this, I don't know what they did to Hot Rod. I've waited for Hot Rod as a character to be in the franchise since the first film, and I don't know what they did to this character after finally introducing him, but it was just such a letdown. And another thing that annoyed me was the changing of the aspect ratios. It's like they filmed the film with 2 IMAX cameras and 1 regular camera, and they couldn't get the aspect ratios to be continuous between the 2 of them. And I feel like that wasn't something that was supposed to happen, but they couldn't get around it in the editing stage, and they just left it. So I want to like this franchise, but it's so hard when the films are so cluttered and overbearingly humorless with characters that don't really add anything to the plot. There's so much that you could cut out of this film, and it would make more sense for having cut those bits out, that it would actually be a more condensed and solid film throughout it if particular characters, particular scenes and particular jokes weren't even in it. So for that reason, I am giving Transformers The Last Knight 1.5 stars out of 5. Michael Bay has said that this will be his last outing on a Transformers film, and I kind of hope that it is. I kind of hope that they just let it rest now and revisit it in maybe 10 years' time, when they can do something different with it, when, they can revive it as something new and fresh. So, have you seen Transformers The Last Knight? Who am I kidding? Of course you're not. I mean, why after watching this would you go and see Transformers The Last Night? Do you know what? Go and watch Wonder Woman or Baby Driver, because those are some films that are worth your time, okay? Go and watch those instead. Instead, let's talk about what 80s franchise you would want to see done as a live-action remake. Anything from your childhood, anything from the late 80s, early 90s that had a toy range or an animated series behind it. What do you want to see revived for the big screen? Comment in the comments below, let's talk nerdy. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you want to see some more, click subscribe to see more. If you've liked this video, hit that like button. You can always see some more videos here as well. And until that point, I will see you next time. Oh, Transformers, what are you doing to me?